and there's a lot of missing pieces to the story. And I think, every time a new missing piece goes out there, it's just, who doesn't like solving the mystery, right?
8 kids, 1 camera crew, and a family that America watched fall apart in real time. John and Kate plus 8 ran for 10 seasons and turned the Gosselin children into some of the most recognized faces on reality television. But the show ended, the marriage ended, and then something nobody really talks about happened. 6 of those 8 kids stopped speaking to one of their parents entirely. Now, in 2026, some of those children are in their 20s, building careers and relationships the public knows almost nothing about. So where did they all actually end up? The answers are more surprising than most people expect. So stick around, because what happened next changed the family forever. The son whose biggest dream got taken away by his own past. Of all 8 Gosselin children, Colin's story is the one that swings the hardest between triumph and heartbreak. He was the child who generated the most concern during the show's run, the one viewers watched struggle, the one whose parents publicly disagreed about how to handle him. Kate sent Colin to the Fairmount Behavioral Health Institute in Philadelphia when he was 12, a decision John said he only found out about through the media, not through a conversation with his own ex-wife. Colin would later say it was one of the most frightening periods of his life, describing it as a place where he had no support system and didn't even get the chance to say goodbye to his siblings. That detail alone reframed how a lot of viewers saw the family. A parent learning their child was placed in a facility through a news report, not a phone call, is not a small thing. Colin spent roughly a year and a half away, eventually transferred to a separate institution near Pittsburgh. When he finally came out, he moved in with his father John and, later, his sister Hannah, essentially cutting off contact with his mother Kate and the rest of his siblings. Colin has said he hasn't spoken to most of them since 2016. What happened next is the part that made his story feel like it was heading somewhere triumphant. Colin channeled everything: the instability, the discipline, the years of navigating a fractured household, into structure. He joined the Army Junior ROTC program in high school, graduated in 2023, and made a decision that surprised even people who had followed his story closely. He enlisted in the United States Marines, posting that the challenge of the Corps appealed to him more than anything else. For a while, it looked like the kid who once needed a court order just to come home had built himself into exactly the kind of disciplined, mission-driven adult nobody would have predicted. Then, in the summer of 2024, while he was near the very end of training and close to graduating boot camp, the Marines pulled his paperwork. They found the institutionalization record from when he was 12. Colin has said that was the only reason given. No deeper explanation required, no appeal to circumstance. Being in an institution at some point in his life was, in his words, good enough on its own to get him discharged. The same childhood event that had already cost him a relationship with most of his family now cost him the one goal he said he wanted more than almost anything else. Colin said he's working to appeal the decision, though there's no public update confirming whether that appeal succeeded. In the meantime, he redirected towards something steadier and entirely his own: a finance degree at Pennsylvania State University, close enough to stay near his father and Hannah. It's a smaller story than joined the Marines, but in some ways it says more. A decision made by his mother when he was 12 followed him for 8 years and reshaped his life twice. And both times, instead of disappearing into it, he built something new on the other side. The twin who went to Wall Street. Cara Gosselin graduated from Fordham University in New York in May of 2023 with dual majors in mathematics and economics. She then went to work as a financial analyst at Bank of America, one of the largest financial institutions in the world. That trajectory is worth pausing on. Cara spent her early childhood being filmed in a house full of chaos: 8 kids, rotating camera crews, and 2 parents whose marriage was publicly disintegrating. She emerged from that environment and walked straight into one of the most competitive hiring pipelines in corporate America. Fordham's mathematics and economics program is rigorous. Bank of America's analyst program selects from a large pool of applicants. Cara got both. She has kept an extremely low profile throughout. No reality TV appearances, no public commentary on the family drama, no social media presence designed to keep her name in circulation. She just built a career. That quietness is its own kind of statement. Of all the paths available to a former reality TV child, influencer, memoir, podcast, reality comeback, Cara chose the one that had the least to do with being a Gosselin. She is 23 years old, working in finance in New York, and seems entirely uninterested in the spotlight that her childhood was built inside. And she's not even the quietest one. By the end of this video, you'll meet a Gosselin sibling who has said less publicly in her entire adult life than Cara has said in a single LinkedIn bio, and whose silence might be the most pointed statement in the whole family. The twin who went a completely different direction. Mady Gosselin and Cara are twins, but their post-college paths look almost nothing alike, which makes them one of the more interesting pairs to follow coming out of the Gosselin story. Where Cara went into quantitative finance, Mady graduated from Syracuse University in May of 2023 with a degree in English and Textual Studies, Film and Screen Studies, and a minor in Art History. That combination, literature, film theory, visual culture, points towards someone who thinks about media critically, which is a fascinating choice for a person who literally grew up as media content. After graduating, Mady took a position as a community and customer service associate at Bubble Skincare, a fast-growing skincare brand with a strong presence among younger consumers. She also built a presence as a freelance content creator on TikTok, working with brands on sponsored content and creative campaigns. What's interesting about Mady's path is that she is engaging with media and marketing on her own terms, in a way she controls. She isn't revisiting reality TV or leaning into the Gosselin name for attention. She's using her academic background in storytelling and screen studies to actually build something. The difference between being filmed as a child and choosing to create content as an adult is significant, and Mady seems to understand exactly where that line is. The daughter who never let the door close. Hannah Gosselin has been one of the more publicly visible of the Gosselin children in recent years, partly because of her close relationship with her father John, and partly because of her own choices about what to share. Hannah graduated from high school and marked the moment by posting photos in a bedazzled graduation cap with the caption indicating she was moving forward. She stayed in Pennsylvania for college, studying business administration with the goal of one day owning her own business. A practical, forward-focused plan from someone who grew up watching her family's finances play out in public. Personally, Hannah has been in her first serious relationship with a young man named Lennon Johnson Jr., who is studying cybersecurity. The two run a joint YouTube channel called Lennon and Hannah, documenting things like their one-year anniversary and day-in-the-life content together. It's a measured approach to visibility, present enough to connect with an audience, but not overexposed in the way reality TV tends to make people. But to understand why Hannah's choices matter so much, you have to go back to 2018, the year she and Colin moved out of Kate's house and in with John. For years after that, Hannah didn't speak to her mother at all. Then, in May of 2023, around the sextuplets' 19th birthday, something shifted. John later confirmed that Hannah had reached out and spoken with Kate and her siblings for the first time in years. He described it simply, that Hannah and Colin had, in his words, matured a great deal. No dramatic reconciliation scene, no public statement from Hannah herself, just a quiet decision to reopen a door that had been closed for half a decade. That decision is what made the moment at her graduation possible at all. One of the more telling moments in Hannah's recent story came at her high school graduation ceremony in June of 2023. She invited her mother, Kate, who traveled from North Carolina to Pennsylvania, to attend. John was there. So was Colin, in the same gown, walking the same stage. It marked one of the rare occasions where members of the estranged Gosselin family were in the same physical space at the same time. But what actually happened says as much as the invitation itself. Kate and John sat on opposite sides of the venue, close enough to see each other, far enough that, as John put it, there was a football field between them. Kate took photos with Hannah afterward. She never approached Colin, and the two were not photographed together. Hannah's sextuplet sister Leah came with Kate that day. The other three sextuplets, along with the twins Mady and Cara, were not there at all. So the invitation didn't undo years of estrangement. It didn't make Kate and Colin speak. What it did was give every person in that family a choice about how close to stand, and Hannah, the one who extended the invitation, was the only one in that lineup who wasn't choosing distance. That decision, to hold the door open even when she had no control over whether anyone walked through it, reflects something deliberate about how she is choosing to navigate a genuinely complicated family situation. The sextuplets who chose silence. 4 of the 6 sextuplets, Aiden, Alexis, Leah, and Joel, have maintained almost complete privacy as they've moved into adulthood. They are now in their mid-teens to early 20s, depending on the year, and almost nothing about their current lives is publicly documented. What is known is that all 4 remained in Kate's care after the divorce and the family split. John has said publicly, including on the Vice TV documentary, that these 4, along with Alexis and Leah, have refused contact with him. He described it as one of the most painful realities of his life. He expressed hope for reconciliation, but acknowledged he has no control over whether or when that happens. It's worth sitting with how John has actually phrased this, because the language has gotten more specific over time, not less. In a 2023 interview, he said he had 8 graduations that year and only attended 1. He said he'd been estranged from Mady and Cara specifically for 9 years at that point, which, if you do the math, traces the split back to roughly the same window when Hannah and Colin moved in with him. 4 kids went one direction, 2 went another. And whatever caused that fork happened early enough that none of these kids were old enough to drive yet. For the 4 kids themselves, their silence is almost impossible to read from the outside. They grew up being watched constantly and then chose, as they aged into the ability to make their own decisions, become invisible. Whether that's a response to the trauma of public childhood, a reflection of their relationship with their mother, a genuine personal preference for privacy, or some combination of all 3, nobody outside their immediate circle actually knows. Alexis in particular has left almost no public footprint at all. No social media presence, no interviews, no appearances. She is one of the most thoroughly private former child reality stars in recent memory, which in itself says something about what that experience was like for her. Joel and Aiden follow a similar pattern. The only confirmation that they're even still in school or working comes secondhand through Kate's own occasional birthday posts rather than anything posted by the kids themselves. Even Leah, who showed up at Hannah's graduation alongside Kate, hasn't said a public word about what that day was like for her, watching her twin brother and her mother stand on opposite ends of a football field. What ties all 4 of them together isn't a statement. It's the absence of one. In a family where every other sibling has, at some point, given an interview, posted a caption, or sat for a documentary camera, these 4 have collectively decided that the most powerful thing they can do with their adult lives is say nothing at all. What John is doing now, and the family wound that hasn't healed, John Gosselin's life in 2026, looks genuinely different from the chaotic years that defined his public image. He won a significant legal battle against Kate in 2023 when a court ruled in his favor after she filed a lawsuit seeking over $130,000. That outcome closed one chapter of a legal conflict that had dragged on for years. The lawsuit itself traced back to a 2012 judgment, filed back when custody of the kids was still being contested and Kate was fighting to keep filming rights to the show. A Bucks County, Pennsylvania judge ultimately struck that old judgment rather than enforcing it, which meant John walked away owing nothing. Kate's attorney pushed back hard in the press, insisting the math still favored her client. Kate herself filed an appeal weeks later, but the underlying argument from John's side was almost uncomfortably direct. How do you owe ongoing support to children you've been raising largely on your own, while estranged from the parent demanding the money? The court agreed with that framing and the case closed. He introduced his girlfriend Stephanie Lebo publicly in late 2022, confirming a relationship that had been kept private for several years. The two met at a social gathering through mutual friends and had been together since 2021, before going public. John has spoken about the relationship in terms that suggest genuine stability, a contrast to the years of public conflict that defined so much of his post-divorce life. By 2025, that relationship had moved further still. Stephanie was present at Hannah's birthday celebration alongside John, a small but telling sign of how settled his day-to-day life has become compared to the chaos that once defined it. He appeared on Vice TV's documentary series covering the show's legacy, sitting alongside Colin and Hannah to discuss what the show was, what it cost the family, and where things stand now. John was candid about the estrangement from 6 of his children. He didn't frame it as resolved. He said he hoped for reconciliation and left it there, which is about as honest as a person in that situation can be in a public setting. The wound in the Gosselin family isn't healed. 6 children are not all in regular contact with their father, and the 2 who are, Colin and Hannah, only reopened a relationship with their mother in the last few years, and only partially. A mother and son stood on opposite sides of a graduation lawn and never spoke. A family that America watched for years is still, in 2026, working through the consequences of decisions made when cameras were rolling and nobody fully understood what they were in the middle of. What Kate's life looks like now. Kate Gosselin's current life is a significant distance from the version of herself that appeared on television for years. She lives alone in her North Carolina home. The 4 sextuplets who remained in her care have moved on to college, leaving her in an empty house after more than 2 decades of her life being defined entirely by motherhood and the public attention it generated. She holds a nursing license in North Carolina that she reportedly reinstated. Though there is no clear public evidence she has returned to active practice in the medical field. She trained as a nurse before the show changed her life, and those credentials technically position her for a return, but whether she has taken that path isn't publicly confirmed. What's notable is that her nursing background actually surfaced again in an unexpected place. During her own injury on national television, she has said it was specifically her training as a nurse that pushed her to get checked out, instead of just walking it off. Kate attempted to re-enter the public eye through Fox's competition show Special Forces, World's Toughest Test, a military-style celebrity challenge program alongside names like Mel B, Dr. Drew, and Jamie Lynn Spears. Her time on the show lasted less than 30 minutes of the premiere episode. The opening challenge required falling backward out of a helicopter into open water, a task that combined what she later described as her 2 absolute fears, water and height. She made the jump anyway, landed wrong, and immediately knew something was off. She has since described screaming in pain on impact, then dry heaving over the edge of the water while medics evaluated her. By her own account, she initially tried to talk her way out of leaving, telling producers she didn't want to say anything was wrong until the pain got bad enough that she couldn't hide it anymore. She sustained a neck injury during the fall and was eventually taken off by ambulance, with medics initially suspecting a broken neck. It wasn't broken. But months later, she said the injury still hadn't fully healed, describing lingering pain in her neck and shoulders that she attributed partly to stress and partly to the impact itself. It was a difficult public moment for someone who had clearly hoped the appearance would re-establish her visibility, and by her own admission afterward, she said she was still angry about how abruptly it had ended, having barely gotten the chance to compete at all. What Kate's life looks like beyond those data points is largely private. She isn't actively cultivating a public profile. The family she built the show around has scattered, some to her, some to John, some into lives that have very little to do with either parent publicly. The version of Kate that millions of people formed strong opinions about has largely stepped back from view, and what replaced it is a quieter life that she hasn't chosen to document. So here's the question worth sitting with. If the cameras had never shown up, do you think this family stays together? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and check out the next video that pops up on your screen.